It's November 16th, 2020. This is Roqe. Well, let's reserve the word icon to only be used when it is truly deserved. But there is no questioning that today's guest on our program is an Iranian icon. He is a master in his field who is one of the pioneers of Iranian modern art and almost single-handedly created freestanding Western-style sculptures within the Persian tradition. Parviz Tanavoli has been an artist of note for over 60 years around the world, and his sculptures, paintings, and collections are internationally celebrated. This is a rare feature interview with an Iranian-Canadian legend, Parviz Tanavoli. These are conversations from, to, and about the Iranian diaspora. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. This is Roqe. Hi there, welcome to episode number 62 of Roqe. Hope you're in good spirits. Omidvar hastam ke khub bashin. We are on our ongoing mission to build a new audiovisual encyclopedia of Iranian diaspora identity, coming to you on Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and Telegram. You guys, it's such an honor to have the legendary sculptor, painter, scholar, art collector, Parviz Tanavoli coming up on this show. He'll be joining me in a few moments. I rarely get this excited about a guest coming on. You guys know me. I mean, I'm happy to have all these guests that we have on Roqe, but it's truly something I'm looking forward to, and I'm truly honored to have Parviz Tanavoli coming on the show.
I don't know if you remember the first day that you asked me to come to the office, and you want to explain to me that what is going to be Roqe.
Yes.
You explained the idea, and the only person that you mentioned that, for example, we have to interview with Parviz Tanavoli and introduce him to the young generation.
Yes.
And finally the day.
Yes.
Came, yeah.
So you're quitting after today? We've got him. That's it. Yeah. It's done. Well, let's see how the interview goes. You know, I have to say, it was about, I think it was around 2005. I interviewed Parviz Tanavoli. He, of course, has been back and forth from Iran. He was in Iran until 1989. Of course, after the revolution, his studio was closed. He had a lot of trouble being the prominent artist that he had already become through the 60s and 70s. So about 10 years later, he picks up and moves to Vancouver, Canada, which was an interesting choice. I want to ask him about that because, this is a man who was well known internationally, especially in the big art hubs like London or New York. So the choice to come and move to Vancouver was an interesting one. But he's been back and forth since then, Vancouver and Tehran, and of course all over the world where his art exhibitions take place. But I had the chance to interview him in 2005, and it was at his house in Vancouver. And it is one of my favorite interviews I've ever done, just because he is... He's very poetic, the way he speaks about his art, the way he speaks about life, the way he speaks about the world, and I just felt I was, not just because of his iconic works, but just being in his presence, being in his aura, felt like such an honor, such a treat. I've always remembered that, and I've seen him a few times since then, but that was a very special occasion, and so I've really wanted this opportunity to interview him again and to have him on Roqe as one of the masters in the Iranian diaspora. And so
he's a piece of history, so you're quite you should be honored.
Thank you, Kian Docht.
Just reminding you.
Thank you for reminding me I should be honored. I agree with you. He'll be joining us in a few moments. Listen, a special shout out to Arjang Zandnia. He's a Canadian entrepreneur who advocates for Iranian art and culture. He's based in the Greater Toronto area. His new latest venture is called Nahid Corporation, a high-rise development company dedicated to giving back through creating safe, sustainable, vibrant urban communities that enhance the standard of living for all residents. He's also an art collector. I know Arjang is really passionate about Iranian art and artists, and he's a great admirer of the works of Parviz Tanavoli and said it would be his honor to sponsor this episode. So we are grateful for that. Thank you to Arjang Zandnia, although I happen to know based on social media and some interaction that he has awful taste in British football teams. I think he's a Manchester fan or something. I don't even want to know. I've suppressed it because I appreciate the fact that he cares about the Iranian community and art, but he doesn't care about Arsenal.
Neither do I, really.
What?
Wow. British soccer in general, the league, I don't know. I can't follow. The World Cup is enough for me.
You finally crossed the line.
All right. I'll walk myself out.
You have finally crossed the line. Listen, if you want to link to anything, any of our content, our previous episodes, all of our platforms, the hub of all things Roqe is our website, roqemedia.com. roqemedia.com. Our latest Roqe Reads, our blog there, is about the U.S. election, and our episode from it was episode number 59, where we discussed the Iranian community and the U.S. election. This one's called U.S. Election Change or Same Old for Iran, written by Thoughtful Negin, one of our team members here, and she speaks in this piece about what we explored in that episode, which is that it's not just the United States that's polarized. It's the Iranian American community is polarized as well in general, but certainly around they were around this election and the potential aftermath of it. If you want to read that, she asks some really interesting and profound questions in this piece. Again, roqemedia.com to find our latest Roqe Reads. This time last week, who did we have on the show?
Mona.
No. Yes, you're right. We had Mona from Melbourne, who is Mona, who's in Australia, and she runs the Inglisi Farsi Instagram channel, and she is teaching us Persian proverbs each week on Mondays. We're going to have her coming up after Parviz Tanavoli, Mona from Melbourne. But who was on?
Liraz Sharhi.
That's right. Liraz was on last week. Do you remember that, Keon?
Yes, I have.
I know sometimes you don't remember.
Very hints of memories.
Yes.
Somewhere there.
And do you remember, now, who is Liraz? Tell the audience in case they missed that episode.
She is the Israeli-Iranian singer, actress, I think
you are correct.
I think I covered it.
Yes. And what was happening last week? What was the precipitant for bringing Liraz on?
The album release.
That's right.
Zan is the title.
Zan is the album. So an Israeli singer, dancer, as you say, actress, who's also in the series Tehran, amongst other things, who was going to put out this album of entirely Farsi Persian material, Persian songs. It was going to come out last Friday. Right. It did come out. It's called Zan. And somebody just sent me a note today. It's the #1 album in Israel.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
Isn't that great?
incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Congrats.
I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise because, of course, we've talked about this. The cultures are, there's so much shared culture and wisdom and history between Iranians and Israelis. But it's still interesting to hear that the #1 album is an album of Persian
Israeli
songs, and in
Israel.
And I think it was her appearance on Roqe that really threw it over the top.
I really believe so. For sure, it must have been.
We're huge in Tel Aviv.
That's right. The people of Israel listened to that podcast, and they were like, "Let's send this to #1." Anyways, congratulations to Liraz. It was lovely to have her on the show, and what a great thing to have her record go #1. And I see she's been getting some great reviews too in the press around the world as well.
It's incredible. Wow.
You can go to that episode at our website, roqemedia.com, Keon.
I'm not familiar. What is it again? One more time.
Listen, before we get to Parviz Tanavoli, one more thing, which is that this afternoon, Captain Reza and I made a little video and put it on Instagram with a skill testing question, which was quite easy, but nonetheless, a lot of people got it wrong, about who is our iconic guest that we're going to have on this episode. I said the first 5 people to guess it, I would mention on the air. So here we go. We got 5 answers. Reza just handed this to me. Mehrdad Afra, Tara E. Seper, Mina Afra, the entire Afra family, and Hedi Rahmat. Thanks to the 5 of you for getting that right at our Instagram channel at Roqe Media. All right, Mona from Melbourne will be here with the proverb of the week. We'll get to a lot more. See you in a little bit. The fabulous Keon, Captain Reza, and Groovy Shia. Let us get to our featured guest. He is a giant of modern art around the world, the father of Iranian modern sculpture. His works are the stuff of poignance, presence, and poetry. He is the man who almost single-handedly created freestanding Western-style sculptures within the Persian tradition. He's undoubtedly one of the greatest modern and contemporary artists of Iran. Parviz Tanavoli is a sculptor, a painter, scholar, and art collector. His works have sold for millions of dollars and are on permanent display at major international institutions such as the British Museum, the Met, and the Tate Modern. He's the author of numerous books on art and artists in Iran and the Middle East. You might say Parviz's collections and publications are contributions to preserving the history of Iranian art that are as valuable as his contemporary works. He currently resides between Vancouver and Tehran. He was born in 1937 in Tehran and was one of the very first students to graduate from Tehran's School of Fine Arts in the 1950s. Following further art studies in Italy, Parviz returned to Iran and established a studio, Atelier Kabud, which became the birthplace of one of the most significant movements in Iranian modern art, the Saqqa-Khaneh movement. It was during this time that he conceived of the first of his iconic Hiç collection, based on the Persian word for nothingness. Parviz also has a storied career as a teacher. He taught at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design and spent 18 years as director of the sculpture department at the University of Tehran from 1961 to 1979. He has held acclaimed solo exhibitions as well as numerous group exhibitions on 3 continents, including at Olympic Park in Seoul, Korea, the Qatar National Museum, the Royal Scottish Museum, the Museum of Modern Art of Vienna, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Tate Modern in London, and numerous other prestigious venues around the world. His forthcoming book is called A Virus for Collecting. It will be published soon. And news also came out this week that Parviz has donated a collection of his Persian flat weave rugs and carpets to the Cultural Heritage Tourism and Handicrafts Ministry in Iran. We will get to that, but first, the great Parviz Tanavoli joins me from Vancouver, Canada today. Hello, sir.
Hello, Jian. Good to hear you. Last time we spoke, how long was it? It was 15 years ago?
Well, you know, I've seen you since then a couple of times, but the last time we did an interview, you're absolutely right. It was 15 years ago. And actually, I was going to start there, Parviz John, because I have the fondest memory of this interview we did at your home amidst your sculptures about 15 years ago. And I remember going into that thinking, am I going to be able to relate to this legendary Iranian artist? I was intimidated. And then I left after the interview having felt just how poetic and profound your warmth and your messages are. And when I was researching this interview for today, I came across you saying actually that you don't like labels, but you are okay with being called a poet. And that made sense to me, having experienced you before in the past. But for others who see you as a sculptor or a visual artist, why are you a poet?
Well, I consider myself more a poet than a sculptor, but poet working with different material. The base of all art to me is poetry. And poet works with words, painters work with colors, sculptor works with volumes and material. And since we never had any sculpture tradition in Iran before, but had a very strong poetry tradition, I feel I am a a follow-up of those poets of Iran, because I feel my sculptures are based on their poetry, right? Poets like Rumi, like Hafiz, like Nizami, and that's why I consider the theme of my sculpture is poetic.
Your poetry comes through your hands.
That's right. When I work, actually, it's based on poetry that is in my mind. And in my mind, these poets are like singing, like reciting.
So do you see now? See, already you've thrown me off track. You say something, I knew this was going to happen, and I want to discover it. So do you see poetry in your mind, and you translate that into an image, a sculpture, a form?
Exactly. Yes. You said it. In my mind, there is a poet moving, working, and all I do, I like to give it a birth, give it a volume, bring it into the world.
But when you bring it into the world, it's no longer moving. Is that frustrating?
It's no longer moving, but I try my best to make it as much possible to give the poetic meaning. Of course, my sculptures are not moving, but they do have some meaning behind them.
Of course. And I want to get to that and how you basically started this a new strand of modern art for Iran and for the world. But let's start with this collecting, because this is the thing that you seem to be most obsessed with recently. You've got this book coming out, A Virus for Collecting. You've just donated this collection. So let me start there. If we continue with the notion that you're the poet, why does a poet get obsessed with collecting? Is there a connection between the poet in you and this virus, as you've called it, for collecting art?
Yes, there is. There is a strong connection because my collection are my material, my inspirations. I didn't collect the kind of things that they don't inspire me, they don't talk to me. I only went after objects that they talk to me, they inspire me. You know, not having a sculpture tradition in Iran, objects have replaced that. Handmade objects, locks, doorknobs, weaving, carpets of all kinds. And these have replaced the three-dimensional sculpture. And these are like my material to look at.
I got it.
To work with.
But Parviz John, you can be inspired by them. You don't have to collect them. Collecting suggests that you want them in your arena. You want to have a piece of them. Is that part of the inspiration, to actually own them?
Well, you know, once I collect these things, I like to learn more about them. I study them. I like to know who made them and when they were made. And so at the end, it comes like a research. And this research, of course, ends up to be accumulated to all of these pieces accumulated in a book as a collection. And so I have written 2 dozens of books on my collection already.
Yes. You know, if you don't mind me getting a little bit philosophical on this note of collecting, I mean, you did have this exhibition, Virus of Collecting, last September. You have this new book coming out by the same name. I was privy to reading the introduction to it. You sent it to me, and you talk about how you've always been a collector. Even as a little kid in Iran, you were collecting, bottle caps and things. But it occurs to me that collecting, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also curating. Collecting is a form of curating, in which case you would be both the artist and the curator. Is that a paradox somehow?
No. That's you said it very well. Collecting is like curating, and in fact, it's curating. And for me, the third dimension is creating. After that, I don't copy my pieces from my collection. I get inspiration from them. And if you look at my sculpture, they're all based on Iranian material, not followed any of Western sculptures.
Yes.
I respect Western sculpture. I love them. And I like many favorites among them. But my sculpture is not after any of the Western sculptors.
There's a sort of breaking news element to this interview that I wasn't expecting, because we're kind of doing a lifetime interview. But the news has just come out, as I mentioned in the introduction, that you have just donated a collection of your Persian flat weave rugs and carpets to the Cultural Heritage Tourism and Handicrafts Ministry. This is a total of 1,400 rugs or so, including some woven by Iranian nomads. Tell me about this decision of yours.
Well, I enjoyed collecting during the last half a century or more, and I did my job with them, and I like them to look at them and get inspiration and enjoy them. It's a pity to disperse them, to send them around, or to get rid of them, or in any ways of selling or whatever. And I like them to be all together in a museum, but I don't have ways of. My dream was to make a museum myself, but I cannot do it at this time. So I asked the government to do it, and they are going to do it for me.
And not to be indelicate about this, but do you trust the government? I mean, you haven't always had the greatest relationship with the authority. At some point, they confiscated your art in your Tehran home. At another point, there were some issues with your street art. Do you know that this art is going to go into the right places?
I hope so. But I mean, the people I'm working with, I know them. They're good people. They're, museum people, and these museum people, I trust them. I hope they remain. That's the problem with Iran. You don't know who's going to remain, who's going to go. But if they remain, I would be, my mind would be at rest.
Can I just, when some of these rugs, when you talk about part of this collection, which is massive, I mean, this is quite a donation on your part. Some of them woven by Iranian nomads. For example, where would you come across those pieces?
All of them are woven by Iranian nomads and villagers. I traveled throughout Iran in every village, every countryside, all tribal areas, and have collected this one by one, and not through the tribes or through the villagers, but many through the dealers. And since 50 years ago, I've been buying these pieces and accumulating the collection, making them completed. So there are collections of kilim, there are collection of gabbe, there are collection of salt bags, collection of mafrash. There are about 25 or 30 different collections altogether.
You talk about this collecting. You just said a moment ago, this being about inspiration for you, but I feel like it's about a lot more than that. It's about carving out a place in history for these artists. I mean, you own this rare collection of art from great artists, and in some cases, folks you've worked with: Sohrab Sepehri, Bahman Mohasses, Hossein Zenderudi. Is part of where you're going with this, especially when we see you donating this to museums, a desire for you to play a role in indexing, in showcasing, in excavating Iranian artworks for the world to see?
Well, yes, that's a small contribution, my modern art collection that I did. It's not a big collection. It's a modest collection, but these were all my contemporaries, my friends. Most of them we exchanged when we were together, when we had exhibitions. And so they are very memorable to me. And of course, I'm very proud that I have kept them, and now I exhibit them, and I hope they all go together at the same, in a museum or in a collection, remain the same.
Where are they, Parviz? Are they in Canada or in Iran or where?
They are in Iran.
They're all in Iran.
Yes.
I don't even know the answer to this. Is it possible to, if you wanted to exhibit that collection in New York, is it easy to bring them from Iran?
I hope so. I don't think why not. I mean, if it's not for sale, I think I'm allowed to bring them. But I don't know Iran. You know how Iran is. They change the regulation all the time.
Yes.
So you don't know what's going to happen next day.
So speaking of Iran and your journey as an Iranian kid, I wanted you to take us back to how this commitment to art began for you. We talked about you being a collector even when you were 4 years old, 5 years old. Parviz, there's a lot of media about you over the years. Obviously, there's documentaries, stories, interviews, but actually not a lot about your childhood. And, most specifically about how I was thinking of your parents and how they would allow a kid, in the 1940s in Iran to pursue art. And then in the 1950s, even to go to Milan as a young man to pursue art. Was it obvious to everyone that you were supremely talented in this field when you were a child?
I don't think so, no. I was just lucky. I had parents that they trusted me and they let me do what I want, and that's why they weren't in art. My parents weren't in art. We didn't have anyone in art in our family, in fact. But I was the first one. But they let me do it, and I did it.
They didn't question you, like, Parviz, what are you talking about? You need to become a mohandes?
Yes, I cheated my parents. I said, I'm going to become a doctor, and I came back doctor in a sculpture.
Perfect.
My mother always said, do a sculpture, get sick. What kind of a doctor you are?
Well, you heal a lot of people with your artworks, that's for sure. So you returned from Italy in the 1960s, as the story goes, after doing, art and having your awakening in Milan and in Italy, and you become fascinated and obsessed by the fact that, as you mentioned earlier in this interview, Iran has no tradition of sculpture. You've just come from a country in Italy that has a continuum of great sculptures. And even if in Iran we had beautiful mosques and designs and, locks and tools, we don't have this tradition of sculpture. So you set out to change things and do something new. How did you dare to try something like that something that didn't really even exist in our cultural homeland?
Well, I tell you, when I came back from Italy, I was first very much influenced by Italian art. I was like half Italian myself. My dressing, my attitude, everything. I was so fascinated by Italian culture. But then when I learned, I went to our bazaars, I went to our villages, I went to our shrines, mosques. I realized how rich we are. And bit by bit, I got rid of it. And of course, you have to have a courage to do that. And I had plenty of that.
Well, actually, I want to ask you about courage. First of all, tell us why you needed so much courage.
Oh, because people didn't understand it. People even thought I make mockery of history. Because when I made, for instance, Shirin Farhad or Lady and Majnun in junk sculpture.
Yes.
The people revolt against me. They were angry. They said,
yes.
I'm making a joke. But they had not seen new material. They had seen all in these stories in miniature, beautiful Persian miniature or carpet. Iranian always like fine art, very fine things, finely woven rugs, fine miniatures, fine tapestries, and so forth. And my sculptures were all rough, are how do I say, grotesque. And so it was not easy for their eyes to digest it.
Right. And let me just explain what you were just referencing for those who may not be familiar with some of these pieces. When it came to human and animal images, you soon created this new kind of anatomy, in your characters, something different from, say, the Renaissance anatomies. And what you created was not, as you say, was not received very well at first, but you persisted. I mean, it's amazing that you did. And I say this with utter respect, but does it take a certain kind of supreme confidence to be an artist that pushes boundaries and does something new? You've said, I've built my own world, built my own vocabulary. That's quite audacious. Do artists need audacity to be able to break new ground? Well,
dear Jian, not all artists have to have the same route, the same pattern. Each artist has his own pattern or her own pattern. I decided to have this pattern for myself, and this is not a pattern that I could be used by others. Probably nobody else would like it even. But I did and followed up. I had my hard years, hard times. It's all over. But the time came that people understood me. They realized that I'm not joking. I'm serious about it.
I'm grateful that you were bold enough to keep going. This makes me want to return to the question of courage, though. And I was asking you about that pivotal period when you returned from Italy and you start to really put your stamp on the world in Iran, and where you got the courage to persist with new artist ideas, even when they were unpopular, even when they flew in the face of tradition. You were a young artist. How did you find the strength to not succumb to popular opinion or convention and instead to follow your own artistic path?
Well, I don't know where I got it, but I had plenty of courage and plenty of energy, and I really meant to do whatever I did. I believed in it. And I was so excited doing it. I couldn't wait to produce more and more sculptures. And of course, as I mentioned to you, not all of it was received warmly or friendly, but still I wasn't encouraged to continue. It was a period of time that, I was flourishing. I don't know how do I say it. I was getting more and more creative because every day I went to the bazaars. I got ideas. I went to Copper Bazaar. I got ideas. I went to Blacksmith Bazaar. I got ideas. I went to Junkyard. I got ideas. Iran was like a mine of treasure for me, a mine of ideas, and I couldn't wait to put my hand on all of them.
Wow.
That's how I was busy every day. I was busy every day doing, and I felt I was always behind. Although I was not wasting any time, but I was behind my ideas.
What do you mean you were behind?
Because I couldn't fulfill them. I couldn't do all of them the way I wanted.
Right, you had so many, and
I was bombarded by ideas. I was bombarded by all those beautiful sights I was seeing, and I got ideas. And as I told you, Iran was untouched by them, and still today, nobody had done anything on those.
I mean, it's undoubtedly it was a fertile period for you. But again, I mean, I don't want to belabor the points. But if you can take your mind back to those moments when you, for example, when you're sculpting anatomies that have not been created before, I guess how in that moment did you know that was okay, that you could be that audacious, as I said before?
Well, you see, I was aware of the sculpture internationally. While I was in Europe, I was going to see exhibitions. I was going to see galleries and artist studios. So the courage I got it maybe from there, that there is no end for an artist to create his ideas, and there is no limitation and no censorship in your own studio. But also I had the faith. I had the faith that these are the right thing to do. Although they were different, but I had the faith that I'm doing the right thing.
As you started to get well known in Iran as a young, groundbreaking artist, did that put pressure on you to have to perform a certain way, to have to deliver the goods, to have to be a certain kind of artist?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, sometimes maybe it does, because Iran, especially in those days, was very conservative. The people who were more interested, they were aristocrats and upper class, and those were more conservative, and they did not open up so easily. And of course, ordinary people weren't even interested in that much. But a young group of students were my followers, really. So these were serious, and they were following me everywhere, everything I did. And among them, there were some who followed me and understood me, and then became my follower. And that was good encouragement for me. I wasn't really afraid.
You end up having this massive success with Hitch, your sculpture about nothingness that soon becomes a series for you. And you may know, I don't know, my life has mostly been in music, and so I think of it like a hit song. And I always wonder if musicians know when they've just written a hit song. And I wonder if when you completed Heech the first time, if you had any sense that this was going to connect with people and become this iconic piece for decades and decades forward.
You don't believe it, Jian. Heech was the most popular item I made. I mean, one of the most popular sculpture was Heech. I didn't realize that it was going to be liked so much. From the beginning, it was liked by people, by ordinary people, and was understood because the shape of it, the body of the Heech is familiar to everyone, to every Iranian. And also it relates to our philosophy, our poetry. So the Heech, I had no trouble to making Heeches, and that's why I continued making all these Heeches, for 50 years.
But you didn't know it was going to be as popular as it was?
No, I didn't know. Absolutely, I didn't know. I didn't know. I thought that the first one was the last one. But it ended up, I have made thousands since then.
Well, what about the decision to make thousands? I mean, you once said, I am a Heech-making factory. It pays for my whole living. Everyone has to have a Heech. Rings, jewelry. What amazes me is they still want them. I'm quoting you there. I mean, the piece is iconic, but and I don't think anyone has ever blamed you for this, but did you ever worry about being somehow to be seen as commercializing your own art, that it would somehow dilute the magnitude of your creations?
You know, it's not 1,000 copies. Each one is original by itself. I mean, there are some small editions. There are some like 5 or 6 editions, maybe some of them, not all of them. But I changed the shape, and I changed the material. I mean, some of them are made in silver, some in bronze, some in paint, some by mixed media, neon, and plastic, and also the size, also the shape. It's amazing how this single board can have so many variations, and still people can relate with it and read it.
Parviz, I'm not going to ask you about the meaning of nothingness, because I know you've been asked that for 50 years in every interview. But I will ask you this. As time goes on, does your relationship with a piece of art like that, like in other words, Parviz Tanavoli today in 2020, do you see that piece of art the same way you would have seen it in 1970 or 1965? Well,
this piece has become my best friend, you know. Actually, I'm so used to it. I can create Heeches everywhere, or in any condition, under any condition. Now, of course, it's so popular now, as so many other people are liked it, so many admirers, that I don't have that problem of explaining it anymore. People people do that by themselves. A poet have written poetry about my Heeches. Other artists have been inspired by my Heeches. The Heeches have gone on to T-shirts, onto hats, and now on masks, on coronavirus masks. I noticed a lot of people wear Heeches on their masks.
Wow. I have to get myself a Heech mask.
I try to send you a picture. I don't have any.
I mean, it makes sense. Why not a Heech mask? Yes. So it continues. You mentioned that there's a cultural connection and a historical connection with that piece of art, and I want to ask you about being a de facto historian. I mean, it seems that your art and your work over the years has had various functions. Certainly one of them is creating groundbreaking art, but another one is almost preserving Persian, Iranian images and history. And it's no secret that most of your most profound work has been located in our cultural history, like Persepolis, I'm thinking, your wall of Persepolis that you made in 1975, which remains one of your most iconic pieces. And of course, it's well known for the remarkable record-setting price for which it was sold. But it's more than just a fancy art piece. It's about ancestry. How much, Parviz, have you been driven by wanting to preserve, present, and spread Persian history. And I suppose, how much does the artist have the role of being the historian? How much are you given in by that imperative?
I mean, to tell you the truth, artist doesn't have any responsibility, or it doesn't have to preserve. It's not artist's job to preserve the history. It was not mine either. It was just I got my ideas from those monuments and from Persepolis, for instance. First time I went to Persepolis, I was running from one corner to another. I couldn't believe it. And I got all kind of ideas because it was not touched, I mean, except in his history books. And that got me to do something, I relate myself to Persepolis. And by relating myself, of course, I didn't want to copy images of Persepolis. That was not my job. And all the people, whoever they do it, I think they're doing craft job, not art job. I was inspired, and I did my own idea, my own concept, my own vision.
But there is an educational element to what you do. I mean, your art teaches us about Persian history and culture, doesn't it?
Yes, of course. I mean, I was always interested in history too. That besides the point. When I was studying history, of course, I wasn't an artist. I was just historian, and that was a serious matter. I had to study serious. When I was writing, I was in a library. I wasn't doing the art job. I had to be like a historian, mark down the facts and my researches and so forth, and my field works. It's different than being into the studio, which you are a free bird and you don't have any limitation, any censorship in your studio.
I mentioned the Persepolis, the wall of Persepolis, and the auction and the record-setting price. And I have to say, I mean, after all these years since our last formal interview, I'm doing the research on you, and I was quite astounded that almost every article about you or informational thing about you tends to cite the fact that your works have sold for record-setting prices, and that you have this distinction of the pieces that have earned the most money of a Middle Eastern artist, etc., which of course is a distinction. But I wonder about you and how much you really actually care about that. Do you celebrate? Do you do a fist bump in the air every time that record-setting money comes in, or is that just some icing on the cake that really isn't what this is about for you?
Oh, listen, Jian, that's a market of art, which is very strong, of course, very strong. Most powerful fact in art, modern art, is market. It's not anymore newspaper critics or museum, but the market kind of decide about destiny of an artist and puts him in a different category. Yes, when I heard that I broke a record, of course I was happy, but to tell you the truth, that money didn't go to my pocket. The piece belonged to a bank, and I had bought it ahead of time from me. But still, it benefited me a lot. I don't want to deny that. But I wasn't cheating myself by believing that the high price is the best. I think that's market, and I don't deny it. It's all right. It's one of the facts of the art, to judge the art today, but it's not everything.
If a piece of your art sells for a high amount, I mean, Heech comes to mind. Obviously, the market has determined that that's a very popular piece. Does it actually make the piece more valuable to you?
Not really. Not to me. To a lot of people, it does. To a lot of people, especially collectors. Collectors like the numbers and the figures and so forth, and they follow the market. But not to me. I follow my own ideas sometimes. And in fact, whenever I do something, it's not those that have fetched highest. When the Persepolis fetched the highest price and broke a record, I didn't do more Persepolis. I switched to other things.
Right.
Not that I continue doing that.
Parviz, let me ask you about the recent decades and coming to the West, coming to Canada. Because it's been so much a part of our collective experience, the 1979 revolution in Iran, we tend to, at least in the Iranian community, kind of accept that it was a difficult time and okay, everybody had to endure it. But it profoundly changed lives, including yours, as a high-profile artist at the time. How difficult was the 1979 revolution and its aftermath for you, given that you were arguably in your artistic prime?
It was not easy, Jian. It was very, very hard. It was very hard. I cannot deny it. It took me several years to digest it because it was like a shock. But nevertheless, I did not give up anything. The first 10 years of the revolution, which we were stuck in Iran, I managed to continue my work. I locked up myself in the studio. I hardly went outside. Outside was all the revolutionaries going back and forth, and with the slogans, revolution slogans. I did not stop my work, but of course it affected me, and the time came that we decided to leave Iran because there was no chance for me anymore. No galleries, no exhibitions, and sending out my artwork was difficult. So we decided that it's not anymore for me, and also for the future of my children. I have 3 children. And so we decided to come to Canada. And that wasn't easy. My wife, my family, they were really crying when we left. Because we left a beautiful life in Iran. We put that behind and came here with empty-handed with few handbags, and then that's all. But things built up again in Canada, and now everybody's happy.
You were, I mean, you're somewhat minimizing this. You were a star in Iran, and you were much more well-known in international hubs like London and New York. You come to Canada, to Vancouver, where I can only imagine that you, at least in the early years, when you came here in the early 90s, when you were here, et cetera, that you were living in relative anonymity, certainly compared to what you had in Iran. How was that for you personally?
Well, nobody knew me when I came here, but I came because it was better ambiance for my family. Better housing, we could afford better spaces, and the schooling for my children. And also, Vancouver is a beautiful city and very safe. We all wanted, really, my wife and I, we wanted to go to a safe city after having seen the revolution. We wanted to be in peace. So Vancouver was all right for that. But of course, it was not the best place for an artist. At the beginning, I tried my best to create an atmosphere, and I built myself a studio. I worked, but the result was not as I expected. That's why I went back to my own connection in London, in New York, elsewhere in Europe, and in Iran. I was partly living here in Vancouver, and partly living in Iran in my studio. Or in London, or in Zurich, or whatever, European cities that I had connection. And that made up for it. And in fact, we managed to make up for all the shortages, and things worked out better, much better now.
Your star really has never diminished in Iran and in those international hubs and in the art world. And you've been back and forth to Iran over the years since you came to Canada. You've taught, you've had exhibitions in Iran. I want to fast forward to something that you did just a few years ago, because it was the largest opening you've ever had in Iran. It was the Lions of Iran exhibition at the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art. And I was reflecting on that. This is in 2017, and thinking, I wonder how this felt for you. In other words, did that feel like a culmination of so much you've worked for over the years to come back the celebrated and artist favorite son, and to have that big an opening?
Yes, that's exactly, you said it. Yes, it was. It was my dream that came true. I wanted to have a big show of the Lion in the art and culture of Iran, because I like lion myself, and I've been producing lion since 60s, for over 60 years, but not all the time, on and off. Lion has a deep meaning in our culture, and from Mithraic time to pre-Islamic and to present even in Islam religion, lion has a role. A symbol of the first Imam, Ali. So this continuity to me was outstanding. It was so exciting to see this continuation of some themes that through the Iranian history stands lively and vivid. And I managed to get together masterpieces from the Tehran Museum collectors, and then my own work, which I had produced on lions. We managed to have a big show of lions. I mean, it was a type of the show that Metropolitan or British Museum can organize. It was way bigger than my head, as we Persians say. But I managed to do it. I curated it, and of course, I had collaboration of the people from the British Museum, from elsewhere. I had collaboration from Iranian Museum, from Iranian archaeologists, scholars, and it ended up beautifully and was the most visited exhibition in the history of left the record for the Museum of Contemporary Art.
It's amazing. It's a beautiful story. And at the same time, going to Iran back and forth has been somewhat fraught for you at times as well. In 2016, a day before you were due to speak at the British Museum, authorities in Iran confiscated your passport and prevented you from leaving the country. Again, 2 years ago, you were prevented from leaving Iran, and the Iranian authorities said they were taking your passport because your work creates anxiety. And I wonder how you navigate these moments where your passport is taken away, these difficulties, or quite frankly, how you're supposed to defend yourself against the charge of causing anxiety.
How can I defend? I couldn't. And I'm still under some accusations, like breaking the peace or creating anxiety among the people. Anyway, but that's Iran. That's Iran today. I cannot change it. But when I go to Iran, I have a low profile. I just go to my studio. I hardly get out and work in the studio. My students come visit me. My friends come and visit me. I have my own heart in Iran, and so not very much have social life, except organizing some exhibition like that, or for my student. It's like leaving your father or mother, your parents, when they scold at you. I did not stop continuing my activity in Iran because of the accusation they gave me. And of course, later on it was cleared.
What about outside of Iran? It's been hard to avoid politics outside of Iran as well. You have famously been called apolitical. You've certainly not made your art or your career about politics, but it seems like there have been times, especially in recent years, where the universe won't allow you to to not be political. I'm thinking of the fact that you didn't visit New York when the MoMA was exhibiting some of your work after Trump instituted the travel ban. Tell me about that decision and how difficult that was for you.
Well, that was difficult because I wanted to go to that exhibition. I meant to go to that exhibition, and I loved New York. And a visit to New York for me was like a prize. But unfortunately, that coincided with Trump's decision on banning Muslim countries to enter the U.S. I couldn't go. I couldn't do it. But what could I do? I couldn't do anything. But the staff of New York MoMA, luckily, they were so kind. They informed me about whatever was happening about the exhibition, sent me news and sent me pictures. And it was consoling a bit, but I couldn't change it.
You've traveled a lot. You've gone from place to place a lot. And going back to where we started this conversation as we begin to end it, I want to ask you about being a collector and the nexus between being a collector and feeling attachment to material objects. Attachment. I think of you and I think of how you're someone who has immigrated many times. First you left Iran to go to Italy, then you left Italy to go back to Iran, then you came to Canada, then you went back and forth between Vancouver and Tehran. All these times you had to give up your studio, at times you had to give up some of your works, your tools. Have you ever got used to the feeling of leaving emotional attachments behind?
Yes, you do. You cannot forget it, of course. I have a feeling, I had a feeling, and it was a sad feeling. But I managed to keep myself busy whenever I was away. I managed to switch to some other things, to go to libraries, to study when I didn't have access to my studio and my own objects, my own tools and materials. I switched to other things. To my researches, for instance, or to going around Iran to the tribal people. When my life was in danger in Tehran at the beginning of revolution, because I liked my work actually was liked by the former queen of Iran, and this was like a big penalty for me.
Not just liked. She was a huge fan of yours and commissioned a lot of your work, yes?
Yes, she did. And in fact, that became a good excuse for the revolutionary to attack me and attribute me to the family of royal. And I wish I didn't have any relation, but said he's related to royal family. And so time came that my life was in danger. But I left, but I did not go in hide. I went to the tribal areas of Iran, which I loved, and I did other researches, and I came back full-handed. I didn't waste time.
So is it fair to say that you're a collector, but you're not possessive about objects?
Yes, you see, when I find an object that it talks to me, when I buy it, I love it, and sometimes I carry it or I leave it on my bed. If it is a carpet or it's a kilim, or I leave it in my bedroom, I look at it and I get up, and in the morning I'm pleased to have it. Or it's a small object, I carry it in my pocket like a lock or something, a small object, and I touch it and I see it, I bring it out, I leave it in front of me, I swipe from it. But it's not that I really want to keep it forever. And like recently, I donated all my collection of flat beefs to a Shiraz museum.
Yes.
I mean, not a museum. They are building a museum for my flat beef collection in Shiraz. And that was my dream, to give this to Shirazi people, because that's the land of tribal people.
Wow. So if the lock that you carry around in your pocket and that you look at, that you get inspired by, for example, something you might have found, if you happen to lose that in a cab, do you freak out? Or do you?
Oh, yes.
You do? So you are possessive.
I would be very sad. Yes. It hasn't happened that many times, but a couple of times that it has happened, I have been very sad, very upset, in fact.
Parviz, you've been so generous with your time. Let me ask you about before I let you go, about your endurance and your drive. I mean, it is incredible. You've never stopped. You've never stopped creating, teaching, speaking, influencing, doing your work. Can you? Would you be able to put your feet up and stop?
That's the question my wife keeps asking me. Say, when do you want to go for a holiday, work vacation? You have never gone for a vacation. In fact, that's true. My vacation has been my field works or my researches in museums around the world or other workshops. But anyway, no, I enjoy this life, and I don't regret for what I've done. Of course, I'm now slowing down. It's not like the years before. But still, I'm working. I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I work through the day and until the end of whenever I have energy at night.
Let me ask you it another way. In terms of what is this work about for you now? Do you feel, this may sound like an absurd question, and I don't mean it disrespectfully, because many would believe that you've made not just one, but many masterpieces. Do you feel you've created your masterpiece, whether it's Heech or the Persepolis Wall or any of your works, or is part of the fact that you stay so committed to working a testament that you're still searching for something?
I'm still after my masterpiece. I haven't done it yet, Jian. People say so, but I always feel I could have done better. When I finish a work, even the Persepolis or other pieces of that category, after it was done, I was kind of sad because I felt I could have done it better. So I don't know if this is true with other artists or not, but I feel I can still do better than what I did before.
You know that a lot of people would be astounded to think that you don't think you've created masterpieces.
Well, I mean that's the kind of people. But anyway, I don't want to call masterpieces. It's like your children. To some eyes, some of my works are masterpieces, some lesser. But to my eye, they are all okay. They are all my creations.
How important is legacy to you?
Very important. The legacy, of course, is very important. I feel I'm mission to do this life, and I really I enjoy it. I don't have any regrets for it. I don't want to. If I had to be born again, I think I would continue the same life because I'm happy with the life I have had, in spite of all the problem and difficulties.
But do you care if you are considered one of the greats ever of the art world? Is that important to you? I mean, you are.
I don't know. I don't say I don't care, but it's a history or the time or the people who are the judge of these things, not me.
You know, none of us is around forever. As the man who popularized thinking around nothingness, how do you deal with the notion of mortality?
Exactly. I mean, nothingness is the life here and after, and is a continuation. I think nothingness has existed as long as man existed, as long as human being existed, and always have occupied the mind of man throughout the history. It's not only me and others, but I have managed to give it a volume, give it a shape, and give it a life. Give it a visual life.
But it is. Does mortality mean something different to you now than it would have meant 50 years ago?
No, I don't think so. We don't think of mortality. We often think of life and continuation. I mean, seldom people who are depressed think of mortality. And I've never been depressed. I don't know what depression means. I mean, I have never been depressed in my life. Even during the bad time, I don't get depressed. I get, in fact, when I am given hard time, I get more anxious, I get more creative, I want to make up for it, and I'm busier.
You know, I came across something you said a few years ago. You said, I want to remain a student until the last day of my life. Parviz Tanavoli, what do you feel you still have to learn?
I would say exactly the same thing, Jian. Today I would say the same thing. Every day I learn something. This learning is not all by big things, but some small thing could be, and that brings me some satisfaction. Anytime I learn something, that's my happy moment.
A final question to you. Dear Parviz, and I thank you again so much for doing this and so much for the time you've given us. And I guess I ask this as somebody who, we of Iranian background, and for those of us around the world who are of Iranian descent, you've lived in Canada now for the last 30 years. You have been celebrated here as well, and you just had your first solo exhibition only last year in Vancouver. But I want to ask you as a final question, what does Iran mean to you today?
Well, you see, Iran remains the same. Iran is within me, is not out of me. And no matter where I am, Iran is inside me, and my mind is working with Iran. So I don't forget Iran, but I live here in Vancouver, and I'm happy that I live here now, especially I have a good studio, good life, and Vancouverites have been changed so much as far as art goes. And I think that I see a bright future for Vancouver as a city. They already are planning good shows, good outdoor exhibition. When I came here, I was amazed that I was in fact shocked that in such a beautiful city there is no public art, no artwork in the city. But today they are beginning to do that, and things will work out here too.
Parviz John, I cherished our last interview many years ago, and I'm going to cherish this one as well. I thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Jian. Thank you for doing this.
Khudafis.
Khudafis.
Parviz Tanavoli. He's a sculptor, painter, scholar, art collector. His works have sold for millions of dollars and are on permanent display at major international institutions such as the British Museum, the Met, the Tate Modern. He's the author of numerous books on art and artists in Iran and the Middle East, and his forthcoming book is called A Virus for Collecting. And Parviz Tanavoli joined us from Vancouver, Canada today. The sounds of Sina Batai on the Sound Tour coming out of that interview with Parviz. I'm rejoined here by the fabulous Kian, Captain Reza, Groovy Shaya. That was just that's what an honor that was. There are some interviews that as I'm doing them, I think I'm going to remember this forever, and I truly adore him. His spirit, his energy, his contribution, his legacy, his gentle nature. And I am so proud that we have him as an Iranian and as a Canadian. Thanks again to Parviz Tanavoli. Kian, you're nodding.
Oh no, I'm just everything you said I agree with. I could feel his gentle soul as he's speaking. I just adore that man without ever meeting him.
Shahjan?
Actually, I just want to recite one phrase by Hafiz that always, when I see Parviz Tanavoli's artwork, it reminds me of that phrase. It says, "Jahan o kar jahan jumle hich dar hich ast. Hezar bar man in nukte kardam tahqiq."
Beautifully said.
Thank you, Shah. Captain Reza, I don't think you can top that, so I think you should just say nothing.
Just shut your mouth.
Nothing. Isn't that what it's all about? Each.
By the way, Kian, that translates, as I understand it, to the blender has more blackberries in it. That's what Shai just said.
I didn't get any of that.
Exactly.
I have no idea.
No, it's no.
I didn't catch so what's the meaning behind his Heech artwork?
Well, I didn't want to ask him directly because honestly, he's been asked that since 1965.
Okay.
The Heech translates to nothingness.
Right.
I was joking about the blackberries.
I just ignored it because it was not funny.
It translates to nothingness.
Okay.
And it's sort of postmodern. I don't want to speak for him here, and so I will point people towards places on the internet where you'll hear. Can read about his explanation. But one of the ways he says it is, if in front of you is something, but if you take that away, what's in front of you? Nothing, but there's still something in front of you, which is nothing. So he uses that as a metaphor, but also he speaks about nothingness as being something that's a major element of our poetic ancestry too. That idea keeps cropping up in different parts of our literature and our poetry, and so that's where Heech originally came from.
I think we need to pass around a joint to really understand the true meaning of.
Thank you,
I'm
Keelan.
kidding. No. I first noticed his work in
Not
front
the first
of
to say that, though. I'm sure about about nothingness. Listen, we've got to get to. There's somebody in Australia waiting on the line. Let's shift gears from Parviz Tanavoli to our Monday feature. Every Monday, she is the woman behind the popular Inglisi Farsi Instagram account, and she's fast becoming our resident wordsmith here on Roqe, teaching us Persian proverbs, one painful episode at a time, all the way from Australia. It's Mona from Melbourne.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
What is the latest from Australia? What's happening on the front lines in Down Under?
Front lines. We're springing into spring. I hear you guys are going into autumn.
Yes, we're just bundling up and putting on scarves and winter coats, and you're starting to wear tank tops. Is that the idea?
That's correct. Well, occasionally. Melbourne is hit and miss sometimes. But we're evolving, into summer and spring. And unfortunately, that leads to a lot of pollen. And I'm not sure if you guys suffer from hay fever, but it's not a very good time to be sneezing and sniffling around the place. So
Because people think you have the corona. Right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
We've just cleared it. We're on our 14th day of zero, but we don't want to be sniffling and sneezing.
You guys in Australia, you figured it out. Zero COVID, right?
Yeah, well, we just had another outbreak in Adelaide, but Melbourne is COVID-free for the time being.
Is there some way the Persians of Australia can take credit for this?
I wish we could claim it. Unfortunately not.
Okay, let's get to the business at hand. Mona from the Inglisi Farsi Instagram account, Mona from Melbourne. What are you teaching us today?
So today I was going to ask you guys about a word that has multiple meanings. So what we call a homonym. So one of the words in the Persian proverbs of the week has multiple meanings. And I found that in the Persian language, I could only find a few words that have this. So I was wondering if you knew of this word that has multiple meanings. It's spelt the same. It can be an animal, but it also has two other meanings. And I was just going to put it out there. Maybe Shaya and Reza could even help us out with this one.
Okay.
Can you
hang on a second? Let me just set this up. You've already done a good job of it. But each week, Mona from Melbourne brings us a proverb of the week. And what you're telling us is the centerpiece, the subject of today's proverb is a word that is a homonym. It has different meanings. The one word has a few different meanings, yes?
That's correct.
Okay. And we're supposed to guess what? The word?
Yeah, do you think that you can think of a word that has multiple meanings? And is it also an animal?
And okay. I have to start going through the animals.
Or is that too challenging?
Sag, gorbe,
Shotor Mor.
more.
No, that was last week.
All right. So let's see. I'm going to open this up to Shaya and Reza as well. Can you think of an animal with a word?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Shaya?
I can give you a hint. In the morning, you can drink it.
Drink an
Is
animal?
that an animal?
Like
Sheer. There you go.
sheer.
Sheer. All right.
Ding.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
So,
Right.
the homonym for this word.
Sorry. Let me
is,
explain to
sheer.
non-Farsi folks. So sheer means milk, but it also means lion and courage.
And
sheer should. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sheer Jian. All right. Go ahead.
it also means tap and faucet. Surprisingly enough. So
That's right.
yeah.
Right.
So I couldn't think of any other words that have as many meanings. The only one I could think of was beshkan, but sheer.
So basically, half the words in the entire vocabulary in Farsi are sheer.
Basically.
Sheer. All right. Fabulous. Okay. So now the proverb.
So the proverb is, I know that you have a lot of American guests on your show, on Roqe, and currently there is a lot of, it's a bit of a turbulent time, and this Persian proverb talks about, sort of highlights that. So we can talk about, currently in America, ajab shir to shire, which means that...
Wait. Don't tell us what it means. We're going to guess what it means. Say because I now Reza and Shai, you know what that means, right? Yeah. Okay, so ajab shir. What? Say it again.
Ajab shir to shire.
Ajab shir to shire. How much? Wow, the milk is really in the milk. No.
I just imagine lions attacking each other.
Shir to shir. Yes,
lion
it's
to
like
lion.
it's like a. Would that be it? Like it's Wait a minute. It's a proverb, though.
Oh,
What proverb? It's like it has to have a meaning beyond just a translation.
you got
Ajab
me.
shir to shir. It means like it's everyone's at each other's throats. Is that what it means?
Well,
Ajab shir to shir. Like it's obviously the lion meaning, right? It's not faucet to faucet or milk to milk. So it's ajab shir to shir to shir.
Yes.
sheer to sheer, so it's
Inside-
lion in lion.
Lion in lion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ajab lion in lioness. What does that mean? But what is I don't understand what they're getting at
Like
though.
khar to khar, like, craziness, right?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't
Khar
that
to khar,
what
yeah.
it essentially means?
The more
Exactly.
polite version of khar to khar.
Oh.
They use a different-
Exactly.
yeah.
I
I
they
was
say
actually
sheer to
gonna. I was actually trying to keep it opulent for you, Kian.
Right. That's right. Opulence.
I think I like
Kian
the
don't go together.
I like the less appropriate version.
Okay, so
Khar
now Mona, I'm going to ask Groovy Shaya to use Ajab shir to shira in a sentence, and you can tell us if he's using it correctly.
To be honest with you, because I am not a polite person, I usually say ajab khar to khariye. Yeah, but
So does it mean the same thing as khar
Yes,
to khar?
yes, yes.
Khar to khar
Yes.
means like chaos, crazy.
yes,
Yeah.
shir to shir, same as
Okay, all right. So you can use that a lot for all kinds of things.
Yes.
And Mona from Melbourne, have you figured out where this saying had its origins?
Actually, no. I couldn't find the literature to sort of support it. I think it's something that's just evolved naturally with time, especially in households with multiple children. Or I think it just means general chaos.
Well, that's we will use that
interchangeably with khar to khar.
Ajab shir to shir. I like the fact that we have an alternative to khar to khar.
Yeah.
Khar to khar, for those who don't speak Persian, is what, Kian?
A donkey. So I guess,
Ass to ass.
to me Rezo is more of a donkey and Shaya is a shear. So, it's like, can you say khar to shira? Can you use both?
Kian,
can
that
make
is
a new
you've lost
version.
just you've gone anti-opulent on this episode again.
I told you.
Oh, it happens once in a while.
Mona from Melbourne, thank you so much. We'll be following you on Instagram at English Farsi, and we'll see you next week.
My pleasure, Jian. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That is Mona from Melbourne, everyone. And the proverb of the week, Ajab shir to shire, which really isn't actually a proverb. That's at the end of the day. I think it's just a little saying. But okay, we'll call it a proverb for the fun of it.
Yes.
All right. Listen, Ponta the artist has walked in. Ajab shir to shiri. Can you say that about a person?
Course,
All right.
Of course.
Sorry, Ponta the artist. I don't know why I
Very
said
much
that.
applies here.
Thank you, the fabulous Kian. Thank you, Captain Reza. Thank you, Groovy Shaya. Thanks again to Arjang Zandnia. Arjang Zandnia. We cannot do this without folks like Arjang, who are there to support us and support the Iranian community in the diaspora. Arjang, the entrepreneur, the businessman, the creative mind, the art collector. His latest venture is called Nahid Corporation, a high-rise development company dedicated to giving back to the community through safe, sustainable, vibrant urban communities that enhance the standard of living for all the residents. Thanks for your help, Arjang and Nahid Corp, with this Parviz Tanavoli episode. This is full time for Roqe for today. Our website, of all things, Roqe, is roqemedia.com, roqemedia.com, where you can see the latest Roqe read from Thoughtful Negin, and where you can link to all of our episodes on all of our platforms and subscribe there, and find our patrons page where you can support us if you do wish. We really appreciate that. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together each week. Producer Susan, Ponta the artist, Thoughtful Negin, the fabulous Kian, Savvy Roham, Alaya Merdad, English Muhammad, Captain Reza, and Groovy Shaya. And thank you to all of you out there supporting us and sharing our content. Find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. And as ever, remember, Ajab shir to shir hasti. Mizun bashin.